Hello, everyone. Welcome to a new episode of the Dissenter. I'm your host, as always, Ricardo Lopes, and today I'm joined for a third time by Dr. Menelaos Apostolou. I'm leaving the links to our first two interviews in the description down below, and today we're going to talk about singlehood from an evolutionary perspective. So, Dr. Apostolou, welcome back to the show. It's always a pleasure to have you on.
Hello, and very nice to see you again. And I guess this is like kind of a topic, singlehood. That's like a lot of people are going to be interested in this. Um, One reason is that everybody is born single, right? So you are, yes, it's a phenomenon that everybody experiences. So it's not like me, you, or uh, so everybody has at least some experience of this.
Mhm. Yes, and so just to introduce the topic, how do you approach singlehood from an evolutionary perspective specifically?
Okay, so uh, mainly I approach everything from an evolutionary perspective, everything related to human behavior. So the reason being that um, uh, human behavior comes from the brain. The brain is a product of evolutionary processes. So all human behavior has an evolutionary logic. So it doesn't really matter if it's singlehood or something else. Um, so it's a kind of, evolution is a general umbrella, if you want, a general theory of understanding human behavior. Now, with singlehood, seems to be a bit of a paradox because, in evolutionary perspective, um, the nature of human behavior is mainly to enable yourself to survive, reproduce, or help your genetic relatives to do so. So it's kind of singlehood, because, um, well, if it comes to reproduction, we expect that because we're sexually reproducing species, we would expect that most people would get into relationships, have children, and so on. However, a considerable proportion of people are single. That is, they don't have an intimate partner. Let me also say here is that that's what I mean by singlehood, because in the past they used to say someone's single if you are not married, right? So I mean here, single, you don't have an intimate partner, and it's like a common phenomenon. No? So we just try to resolve this paradox, saying that okay, fine, all right, we're a species that we're sexually reproducing species. Having an intimate relationship is important for reproduction and for survival. So the question is that why so many people are single. Um, so here I can discuss some ultimate reasons, evolutionary reasons why this might be the case, and I can just um, discuss research on the proximate reasons of uh, what's going on there. But that's the general idea. It's try to resolve this paradox, given that uh, in our species, it's kind of important to have an intimate relationship.
Mhm. But we have both voluntary and involuntary singlehood, right?
All right. So I would say that, I mean, if we go into, I would just think that the best way to approach it is maybe discuss a bit more about why it's important to be in an intimate relationship.
Mhm.
To see this is why this is a paradox. So it's kind of so why it's important. I mean, the obvious important in evolutionary terms. So the obvious one is reproduction. However, if you start thinking about it, it might not be so obvious because someone could say that you can have just sex and have children, right? You don't have to get involved into something. However, uh, those who have children, they will know that this is not an easy task, right? You have to spend considerable resources. It's like it requires prolonged investment, and it's kind of it's not easy for one individual to bear. So if you really want to have children that survive and reach sexual maturity, especially during human evolution time, it works best if you create a family, right? So it's kind of not just like having sex and then move on. So staying with someone for a prolonged period of time and invest in children. So this is like, I would say, the main reason that selection forces have favored a human mind that is interested in creating long-term intimate relationships. There are other reasons there. So, for instance, if you just have like a partner, this is a source of support. For instance, financial, emotional, and protection, which were very useful during human evolutionary time. So there are no social protection systems or, I don't know, unemployment benefits or anything. So people had to rely on their families. So you see here, it's kind of having a long, intimate relationship is crucial for survival and reproduction, which means that selection forces have shaped the mind to do so, which is kind of what we observe in general. So across societies and across time, most people would enter into such relationships. We call this marriage. It's a human universal. And eventually most people would enter in something like that. But now, we observe also that some people are not into it. They are so-called single, right? So it's kind of how this paradox then can be resolved. And I would suggest there are three main reasons for this that map to the types of singlehood you mentioned. So there are ultimately, I mean, in evolutionary terms, there are three main reasons why someone is single. One is that if you are to successfully participate in the mating market, you need some preparation, right? So it's kind of not only in mating market, most of the things, most of the challenging things. And singlehood gives you this kind of time and focus to prepare. So for instance, some people might say, I mean, in the long-term mating market, things like a good education, a good job are valued in a partner. However, you're not born with this, right? So it's kind of, you have to focus your energy to develop, let's say, your talents, your strengths, career advancements. So it's kind of, if you are single, you can focus on doing these things. So it would work. I mean, this kind of way, this is profitable to be single for a period of time. So it could be like, I'm single for some time, so I can focus on just getting this job promotion, get this university degree, and then when I look better, let's say in the mating market, I come back. This is one reason that explains what you said. I mean, voluntary singlehood. That is, people are single for this reason. They would just say, all right, I would prefer for some time to be single, so I can develop myself. All right, so that would explain voluntary singlehood. And then, I mean, when we do research on actually the proximate now reasons, I mean, what people would say why they're single, they would say that, you know, I want to be single to have freedom of choice, to be able to focus on my career, on my education, to do whatever I want. So this is one reason. Now, the other one is that people move between relationships, right? So let's say I am in a relationship. For some reason, the relationship ended, and I moved to another one, and it takes some time to find another partner. So it's kind of I'm between relationships single, if you want. Now this is common for different reasons. One reason is that it's not easy to find a good match, a proper partner. And why it's not easy? Well, there are different reasons again for this. It's like one is deception. So there's a lot of deception in the mating market. You know, people would present themselves differently than they really are, and so it can have like, you know, you are in a relationship, and eventually you figure out this is not good for you. It's not what you originally thought it was. So you move on to the next, or relates to figuring out what yourself, what you want. So just you try, some people, you know, just try to get experiences and figuring out what's, you know, what they want and what's best for them. So they eventually they move between relationships to find the right one. Could be unfortunate reasons. It's like kind of bad luck. Let's say your partner dies, let's say, or moves to another country. So these are some of the reasons that make it a bit difficult to find the proper mate, and you have to move between relationships, which results in some people being single because they are between relationships. Now, the third main reason, and I would say this is the main one, it relates to the mismatch problem. So the brain is like has several behavioral adaptations that aim to enable individuals to increase their survival and reproductive success. However, this was like what we see today is the product of a long evolutionary process, which means that our adaptations have evolved to do this, to increase our reproductive and survival success or fitness in the ancestral environment, and might not work very well in the contemporary one if it's like different, considerably different from the ancestral one. I think perhaps the best example and an obvious example you can see is that, you know, have some extra weight, and a lot of people do, and this comes from the fact that during human evolution, food was scarce. So our adaptation, our food intake adaptations have evolved so as to, when you find food, to eat more than you need, store the extra in fat, and then next day that probably there's no food, you can use the reserves. However, this doesn't work very well in a contemporary environment because food is always available and cheap. There are like supermarkets 24/7. I mean, it's like, so that's why a lot of people, including me, are suffering. I mean, we have like more weight than we should. Now here comes also to mating, that we have like situations where it's kind of in the past, the mating market was very different from what it is today. And the main difference was that in the past, there was considerable control over mating by parents. This is called what's sometimes called arranged marriage. So parents, so when you are young, when let's say you were about, I don't know, 15, 16 or whatever, they would arrange your marriage with someone else, and that would be it. Which means that adaptations in relate to mating have evolved in this context. Now, in our context today, it is the situation is different. That is, we have to find our own mates. which means that might not be ready for this. I mean, it's like our cognitive hardware might face difficulties in this challenge, which could result in a situation where people have a difficult time attracting mates or keeping them. And this gives rise to involuntary singlehood. That is, people want to be in a relationship, but facing difficulties in attracting a mate. So, I mean, if you just put together the reasons, I would say that kind of, I mean, it's like in evolutionary analysis to understand this phenomenon, I would say that there are three main reasons. It's like, and one is that it could be beneficial to stay single for some time. The second is that it's difficult to find the right partner, so people move between relationships. And the third is the mismatch problem. It's like the contemporary environment is different from the ancestral one, and our adaptations might not be very, let's say, efficient in dealing with the challenges of the modern mating market, resulting into people facing difficulties in attracting a mate and then being single.
Okay, so, but when it comes to the biggest difficulties that people have or report when it comes to attracting mates, are there gender differences here? Is it that different kinds of difficulties are reported by men and women or not?
Just to tell you the general our well, let me just summarize our findings, and I will just go
Okay.
to these differences.
Mhm.
So I would say, first of all, it's kind of okay. What I said first is the theory, right? It's like what how we could explain the phenomenon. But this doesn't mean that's necessarily true, right? So let's go to the empirical now evidence. And because this was like a phenomenon that's kind of unexplored, I would say we started with a different kind of approach. We started with asking people, single people, why they were single. And well, using different methods like that, interviews, open questionnaires, posts on the internet, we got like with a big list, like more than 90 um, reasons. And then in larger samples, we ask single people to rate these reasons. I mean, why you are single, is this reason, the other, or whatever. And using statistical analysis, we got uh, uh, we classify these into three main categories that sort of reflect more or less what I discussed before. So being between relationships, having difficulties in attracting mates, and have freedom to do what you want. So let me, I mean, if I just go through some of this data. So for instance, the between relationships category, people would report that, that between relationships, they have difficulties finding the right one, or they have even a fear that they will get hurt. So that was one category. The other main category was freedom, where people indicated that they want to be free to do whatever they want, to focus on their career, but even to be free to flirt around, which is kind of a way perhaps to improve their flirting skills. And the third category was a poor capacity to attract mates, which included things like, just like flirting, not being very good in flirting, um, uh, um, having poor looks, having some sexual difficulties, have some psychological problems, and in this kind of these things are keep people back. So, however, the interesting bit here is that the structure the structure of these regions follows this theoretical logic, right? So you see, it's kind of, that's how it goes. Now, we investigated sex differences. That is, if, just like men and women would see differently. We found some. However, in general, it seems that these differences were not considerable, or the structure of the regions were very similar between men and women. So I would probably say it's kind of there are sex differences, but not major ones. I mean, I would say these regions apply to more or less to both sexes.
Mhm. And another thing that you've studied is related to being able to attract a mate, of course, is strategies that people use for becoming a more desirable mate across different cultures. So, first off, what are the different kinds of strategies that people employ?
All right. Now this was kind of, or to be effective in this. Well, we'll employ several strategies to make them more desirable as mates, and
Yeah.
could be because of the mismatch problem. Some people are not very effective in doing this. So we investigate this, could be like kind of also in a way to help people, get ideas of how they will improve themselves in these areas. So there are different strategies, something like involving like things like improving on one's looks, in working on their strengths, discussing about their strengths, hiding, let's say, perhaps some of undesirable qualities. This could go even further to research we do currently do that involves deception. That, okay, it's a different thing. It's like to present myself. I mean, to highlight my strengths. Okay, so that's one strategy. That's one main strategy. But then it goes a step further to lie about my strengths. So it's like, if I'm well off, I can sort of highlight this. So that's one strategy of promotion, right? So I kind of get like of self promotion. So I get like a big car, or an expensive car. However, people would go a step further and lie about it. So I'm not that well off, but I borrow your car, which is kind of nice and fancy, and I present it as mine. So it's kind of, I mean, this is kind of a reason for singlehood, because then I present myself as someone else, and if I'm successful, some women will fall for this, and then they will just come. But eventually, these strategies are sort of deception are short term. So eventually, they will figure out that I'm not that wealthy or whatever, and they will move on to another relationship, giving rise to this between relationship singlehood. So I mean, all these aren't related. Um, but again, go back to your questions. Kind of, people use different strategies, mainly aiming to work on their strengths and then highlight these strengths to prospective mates, let's say improving their looks. But I would say that probably one reason that people are single is that are not very effective in deploying these strategies, and one reason that are not very effective in deploying these strategies is because of the mismatch problem. So that, let's say, for instance, we notice in the data that some people wouldn't, let's say, work on their looks, right? Which is an important part in the free mating context, right? It's kind of, and it's an important strategy of self-promotion. And then people just don't care at all, which has an impact on their success in the mating market. And why they don't care at all? Because in the past, there was, this arranged marriage, and where parents, let's say, would arrange marriages, they wouldn't care at all about, they would care, but not considerably, about the looks, let's say, of their prospective in-laws, right? So this was not their concern, right? So it's kind of, so if this was not very important in the mating market, so I don't care about this because it doesn't really matter how I look. My marriage would be arranged. But this has a price now, right? It's like kind of people, they don't deploy this strategy of self-promotion, and the looks are poor because they don't pay attention to this, and this, which it's an impediment in finding a mate, and this cause of, like, one of the causes of singlehood.
Mm-hmm. But do these strategies for becoming a more desirable mate vary cross-culturally?
We did some cross-cultural research, and as usual, there is variation. There's variation. However, I would say is that there's also considerable consistency in the structure and what people would use. However, there is a limitation in our research, and it's kind of, we focus on contemporary post-industrial societies. So I would say in these societies, paying attention to looks, that's like it was a consistent strategy found across different cultures. However, I don't know if it's going to be the same if we go in a pre-industrial context. So I would probably say that there is variation, but there is considerable consistency in post-industrial societies. I suspect there will be more variation if we compare post-industrial and pre-industrial societies.
Mm-hmm. So you've also studied the connection between the fear of relationship commitment and singlehood. Would you like to tell us about that?
All right. So it's okay. I could say that. All right. So it might pay for people to be single for some period of time. So let's say to focus on your strengths, to do different things. How this would materialize, that is, in your mental accounting, it's not always that you would think like that. It's kind of, this would be like, reflect on your emotions. So perhaps you don't feel like being in a relationship, or have a fear of being committed into one. So this could be one reason why people have this fear, to keep them away from a relationship for a while, so that they can focus on different things. However, this is again a complex phenomenon. It has more to it, right? So what happens is that when you get into a relationship, and it's not a good one, it's not a fitness increasing, this can cause emotional pain, which is good, because it's kind of your way to tell you that you have to do something about it. You either improve the relationship or get out of it. So this pain has sort of a scarring effect. That is, it's like a scar. So when you are out of it, it sort of helps you to consider what went wrong, right? So that it won't happen in the future. And to consider what went wrong and improve it, you might need some time. So it's kind of, this pain keeps like causing a fear of relationships when you're out of them. So probably this is a way to keep you outside of the mating market for a while, so you can, improve on what went wrong, to see what went wrong, what I did wrong, and improve so it doesn't happen to you. So it comes from I would say probably this is the main reason. It's kind of experience from the relationships might cause like kind of some negative emotions, and these negative emotions might cause some fear of relationships that might keep people away for a while, which could be a good thing. Because all right, because like if you think about it, if I had like a failure, a relationship failure, it's not very wise to rush into another one. It's maybe take some time to think about it. And this fear of getting into a relationship might help me for a while. Um, um, now, for and that will be probably a sex difference. So, do you see? I mean, the phenomenon is complex; it doesn't have just one reason. In certain cases, um, now there is the sex difference. So men would tend to prefer casual sex more than women. And if you are in a relationship, obviously this is not what you can do. So it could also be that men have this fear of relationship commitment more than women because they simply just don't want to commit, because which allows them to have, let's say, casual sex with different partners. I would think this is kind of life stage dependent. So kind of, so you see, it's kind of when you are younger, probably this is more, you don't want commitment, you have like a fear of commitment, but probably this resides as you get older for both men and women. So it's just like bottom lines that people might don't want to commit or have a fear of relationship, which like will be a complex. I mean, they have like it's a complex phenomenon. There might be many reasons for this, but has also a positive aspect. I would think that is gives people some time away from the mating market to better assess what's going on and improve themselves. So it's not necessarily a bad thing.
Okay, so I think that we've already talked a little bit about this, but what are some of the main advantages and disadvantages that people report of being single?
All right. Okay, so we asked different people to tell us some advantages and disadvantages. So the advantages we discussed before, it's like kind of having freedom, having more freedom to do what you want, which makes some sense, right? So it's kind of now, it's like I'm married. I told to my wife, just go right. I need some time so I can just talk with Ricardo and whatever. Right. If I was single, I wouldn't have to bother reporting to anyone, right? So that's I would say which like frequently people report. Another advantage they report is that we said this before, but if in some instances the relationship could be like not go very well, which results into struggles, fights, and negative emotions. I will talk about this later. Which can be very nasty, or feeling like, let's say, jealousy or anger. Well, when you are not in a relationship, well, you don't have to experience these things, right? Um, um, so this is kind of an advantage. However, this brings us to the disadvantages, and the main disadvantage is the opposite of it. It's kind of people would feel lonely. Uh, will experience negative emotions like emptiness, sadness, but mainly loneliness. So it can have an emotional cost. Why it has an emotional cost? This is not just random. It is for the evolutionary reason. That is, if you would feel satisfied and happy being single, then you wouldn't bother to get into a relationship. Um, so your adaptations, your emotional adaptations trigger here uh, to punish you for not doing something that promotes your fitness. So it's kind of they turn your emotional mechanisms turn singlehood to be, in general, not always, but in general, an unpleasant experience that is a way to motivate you to get into a relationship. When I say it's lonely, what I mean is like it's a negative emotion that I want to get rid of, and which motivates me to find an intimate partner, which is a way to get rid of it. So in terms of disadvantages, then I would say this is the main one we got here. Plus, of course, we don't have like people would report that they don't have someone there to be there for them to support them, to discuss their problems, and this could be an an issue because I mean we are social species, so we just need social input from others. We discuss our problems with others, and in a contemporary world, which tends to be individualistic, yeah, people sort of have fewer friends, have to move around, live on their own. So when they face a problem, they might not have someone around to talk about it, which makes an intimate partner even more important than in the past for this reason. I mean, in the past you had like your family around, your cousins, your parents, your whatever. Now you have nobody. You can have like your intimate partner, and even if you don't have this one, then things become even worse. So it's like kind of, being single is like kind of that's what people would report. That's another reason is like not having someone to connect, to discuss their issues, their problems.
Mhm. And are there factors that might play a role in how people deal with the disadvantages of singlehood? I mean, are there, for example, contexts that might lead them to more easily discount the disadvantages?
Well, we haven't investigated this adequately, but I would say it depends uh, on the situation. So, for instance, if you have like kind of, as you are saying, like the context, if I have like many friends, this to some degree could balance. It won't perfectly balance it, but it will balance, let's say, being single, right? So it's kind of also, let's say, depending on how important is my work, right? So it's like my career. I should like people who are career focused might not take it easier, let's say, than those who are not. Um, if you have, let's say, if you live next to your family, would be also important. Then it's just like moving to another country and be just on your own. So the singlehood there would be like even more painful, I would think. However, these are uh, hypotheses. I don't have data now to tell you that this is the case, but I would suspect that these are factors that play a role there.
Mhm. Okay, so I guess that I have just one last topic I would like to ask you about. We've talked here about what people report as being the advantages and disadvantages of being single. And what are the specific benefits of being in a relationship? What do people have to say about that?
All right. Okay, so this is the other side of the coin, right? So it's kind of, again, um, so people would think that they don't have to feel lonely. They might experience positive emotions, like love. Uh, Sexual satisfaction also appears to be an important reason. They also have someone to be there for them. So it's kind of, it's like just a coin, right? So it's kind of, if I ask you about the advantages of being in a relationship, the people say that I don't have to feel lonely. The disadvantage of being single, I have to experience loneliness. Um, um, However, again, this depends also on the case, right? Doesn't mean that all relationships are born equal, right? So it's kind of, it's like from a relationship, you get a lot of support, satisfaction, sexual satisfaction, positive emotions. Uh, uh, but this might not always be the case. It might be also the opposite one, right? So it's kind of, there's no guarantees that, so these are advantages. And another, I would say, probably an underrated one that we have to look into further is that a long-term intimate relationship is kind of provides the context to have a family, to have children, which kind of be like, for most people, it's a very rewarding experience. So, and we expect this from evolutionary reasoning. So an intimate relationship, it's not always an end in itself. It's usually, at least in evolutionary terms, it's means to a purpose, which is to have and raise children, which means that, well, this has not been adequately explored. You see, it's kind of that I would say it's a major benefit that may not come directly into mind, right? You might think that, okay, I want intimacy, I have someone there for me, we have sex or whatever. But eventually, sort of, you need a relationship to have children. So if I take children out of the equation, then I cannot really properly assess the benefits of a relationship, right? Because I would say probably the main one is, to be able to have a family, and then you get a lot of rewards from having a family, from having children. But to get these rewards, you have also to have a relationship, right? So it's kind of, so these rewards are related to this. It's kind of, I can't just take children out of the equation, and that's something we currently investigate.
So finally, I would like to ask you, because apparently there's been some debate on this topic recently, in terms of emotional well-being, is it better to be single or in a relationship?
Yeah. So for your audience, you might have, like, if you search online, maybe you had the experience of it. I mean, there is some recent argument saying that, singlehood is better than being in an intimate relationship. I mean, as we discussed this before, I mean, you have time to do whatever you want. You can just kind of develop yourself, do things. I mean, it's kind of why bother being in a relationship? I would say a lot of these arguments are sort of misleading because they lack a theoretical and empirical basis. And if we follow the theory, as we discussed before, if you choose to be single, your emotional mechanism will punish you for this. I mean, they will motivate you to get into one, right? Because, like, it's not fitness increasing to be single. So this makes the prediction that mated people would be happier or enjoy more positive emotions and fewer negative emotions than people who are single. So we did the research to investigate if this is the case. And that's what we found. And this was a cross-cultural phenomenon. That is, across cultures, in general, mated people, that's if you are married or in a relationship, scored higher in terms of happiness and of positive emotions and experience fewer negative emotions than people who were single. Although the difference was small, so the advantage was small, although for certain emotions like loneliness, the difference was considerable. All right, so it's kind of, you are single, you experience more loneliness, you are considerably more lonely than if you are in a relationship. Now, however, this argument does not consider the quality of the relationship, because, as we discussed before, some relationships are not fitness increasing. We expect then emotions to play a role here. So if your relationship is not fitness increasing, negative emotions would trigger that would make people to take corrective action, one being end the relationship and find one that's fitness increasing, or at least more fitness increasing. That would predict then that it doesn't really matter. It matters if you are in a relationship or not, but it matters also in what kind of a relationship you are. So we extended our argument and we sort of measured relationship quality, and we divide people into those who are in a good relationship, in a moderate quality relationship, in a bad relationship. And we compare these groups with singlehood. And I think this was like a very interesting study because putting everything together and also in a cross-cultural perspective, we found a champion of positive emotions, and that was people in a good relationship. So in a good quality relationship, these were the champions. They experienced the most positive emotions, the highest life satisfaction, and the fewest negative emotions. The second in the hierarchy were people in a moderate quality relationship. At the bottom of the hierarchy were people in a poor quality relationship. So you see how important this is. Like it's kind of, and so bottom was like the champions of negative emotions were people in a poor quality relationship, and then very closely followed those who are involuntarily single. So, and what like then what people between relationships and voluntarily singles. So I mean, if you see the hierarchy, then it's kind of, as we expect from evolutionary reasoning, the champions of positive emotions are people in a good relationship, and the champions of bad emotions are people in a bad relationship, followed closely by those who are involuntarily single, which has like kind of, it's important for this debate saying that, well, in general, you are better off in a relationship, but you have to be very careful what this relationship is. So, I mean, in practical terms, I mean, for your audience, people shouldn't just strive to get into any relationship, but if they manage to get into a good one, that will make a big difference, which is a kind of way saying that for singlehood is good for some time, because to find the proper one, you have to develop your strengths, you have to wait, right? Good things come to those who wait. You have to wait a bit. So it's kind of, you shouldn't be in a rush, because if you are in a rush, you make a wrong choice and then you get into a bad relationship and you are worse off than single. So it's kind of this kind of research has practical applications. I mean, but that's, I mean, psychology shouldn't be also just theory. So bottom line, as we expect, singlehood has an impact on emotional well-being, on how well you feel, but also the quality of the relationship is important, or even more important than this. Okay.
Okay, so basically the simple answer to the question is that a good relationship is better than being single, but being single is better than being in a bad relationship, right?
I would say this. I would say so. So people, but I would say it's kind of, you shouldn't go into like a Hollywood kind of approach, just like saying the perfect relationship or whatever,
Yeah.
because even moderate quality relationship is the next in the hierarchy. So it's kind of, I would say people should strive to get like into a good or a decent relationship. Let's say, because there are no perfect relationships at the end of the day, right? It's kind of, unless you watch a lot of movies, this like kind of, there are no perfect relationships. All right.
Okay, great. So would you like to tell then people where they can find your work on the internet?
All right. So I just upload my papers online on my website, menelaosapostolou.com, or ResearchGate, so they can have a look there. So it's kind of like, so upload papers there. If someone is interested in a paper that they face a difficulty accessing, they can just even email me. I will be happy to send them a copy.
Great. So, Luke, thank you so much for coming on the show again. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Hi guys, thank you for watching this interview until the end. If you liked it, please share it, leave a like and hit the subscription button. This show is brought to you by Enlights, learning and development done differently. Check their website at enlights.com, and also please consider supporting the show on Patreon or PayPal. I would also like to give a huge thank you to my main patrons and PayPal supporters: Per Ergo Larsen, Jerry Mullerens, Frederick Sunda, Bernardo Seixas, Olaf Alex, Adam Kessel, Matthew Whittingbird, Arno Wolf, Tim Hollis, Eric Alenia, John Connors, Philip Forrest Connolly, Dan Demetri, Robert Windiger, Rui Inácio, Zup, Marco Neves, Colin Holbrook, Phil Kavanagh, Michael Stormir, Samuel André, Francis Forte, Tiago Nunes, Fergal Cossen, Hal Herzog, Nuno Machado, Jonathan Labyrinth, João Linhares, Stantantia, Samuel Correia, Eric Hines, Mark Smith, João Eira, Tom Hummel, Sardas France, David Sloan Wilson, Yacila Dez Araújo, Romain Roach, Diego Londonho Correia, Yannick Punter, Dana Rusmani, Charlotte Bliss, Nicole Barbaro, Adam Hunt, Pavlo Stasevski, Nelek Bach, Guy Madison, Gary G. Alman, Sam Afzal, Adrian Yeager, Paul Tolentino, João Barbosa, Julian Price, Edward Hall, Edin Bronner, Douglas Fry, Franca Bortolotti, Gabriel Ponce Cortez, Ursula Litsky, Scott, Zachary Fish, Tim Duffy, Sonny Smith, John Wiseman, Daniel Friedman, William Buckner, Paul George Arnaud, Luke Loaki, Georgios Theophanos, Chris Williamson, Peter Wolozin, David Williams, Diogo Costa, Anton Erickson, Charles Murray, Alex Shaw, Maury Martinez, Coralie Chevalier, Bangalore Atheists, Larry Dealey Jr., Old Erringbone, Sterry, Michael Bailey, Dan Sperber, Robert Grassi, Igor N., Jeff McMahon, Jake Zool, Barnabas Radix, Mark Campbell, Thomas Dovner, Luke Nissen, Chris Story, Kimberly Johnson, Benjamin Galbert, Jessica Nowicki, Linda Brandon, Nicholas Carlson, Ismail Benzliman, George Coriatis, Valentin Steinman, Per Crowley, Kate Van Goller, Alexander Hubbard, Liam Dunaway, BR, Masood Ali Mohammadi, Perpendicular, Jonas Hertner, Ursula Goodenough, Gregory Hastings, David Pinsoff, Sean Nelson, Mike Lavigne, and Dios Necht. A special thanks to my producers: Isar Webb, Jim Frank, Lucas Stafiniak, Tom Vanagdam, Bernard Ugni, Curtis Dixon, Benedict Mueller, Thomas Trumbull, Catherine and Patrick Tobin, Giancarlo Montenegro, Alnick Ortiz, and Nick Golden, and to my executive producers Matthew Lavender, Sergio Quadriano, Bogdan Kanivets, and Rosie. Thank you for all.